The sky peeled open in ribbons of fire as the Solents tore through Velmara's upper atmosphere, trailing smoke and desperation. Within the trembling cockpit, Kalen moved with quiet panic fingers, blistering against scorched metal, rerouting what little power remained into the escape sequence. The vessel was dying. 1,000 mission logs, years of research voices of a crew now silenced, all compressed into a final burst of data ejected into the void before impact. The AI's synthetic voice counted down the seconds until collision, but it may as well have been a lullaby in a storm. Gravity was not kind to broken machines. As the pod ejected, his world narrowed into a tunnel of noise and pressure, a snap of harnesses, a concussion of light, and then the roaring collapse of trees. The ground rose fast. The pod struck. Metal screamed. The world jerked sideways. Then stillness. Kalen woke to the scent of burning insulation and blood, his own breath coming in shallow waves. Bruised, possibly fractured, but intact. He blinked against the red glow of emergency lights and the flickering silhouette of alien foliage pressing in against the viewport. The air outside was thick, heavy, saturated with oxygen and something sweeter, floral, but metallic. Velmara had not been cataloged for manned landings. That was always the risk for fringe reconnaissance. Too far for immediate retrieval, too close for comfort. Now he was alone. By the third day, Kalen had carved out a perimeter around the remains of the pod. The jungle was luminous and a live flora responding to movement with pulses of color, roots shifting imperceptibly underfoot. It was a biologist's paradise and a survivor's nightmare. The emergency beacon flickered against the sky, but the magnetic field warped transmission windows. No signals came through. Still, Kalen persisted. He cataloged glowing mosses that secreted antimicrobial oils, documented trees with crystalline bark that vibrated in low harmonic frequencies. He rationed his water, learned which leaves filtered toxins, and slept in bursts beneath a tarp of scavenged canopy. Survival, like science, was just another method of observation. On the fourth morning, a sound rose through the trees that didn't belong. It was deep, resonant, and primal. Not the call of an animal, but a bellow of pain that shook the marrow. It vibrated through the ground, a pulse of distress folded into fury. Kalen froze mid-step. The jungle around him hushed, reacting not to the cry, but to the weight behind it. He should have returned to the pod. He didn't. His boots crushed bioluminescent ferns as he moved step by step into the origin of the sound. A ravine opened before him like a wound in the earth, and at its base, a nightmare lay ensnared. It was massive feline in posture, canine in musculature, with a dense mane of iridescent silver fur that flickered blue in the dappled light. Metal bands dug deep into its flank, and hindquarters mechanical traps of an origin not native to Velmara. The creature's breath came in wet gasps. Blood, dark, oily purple, matted the fur where the barbs twisted into flesh. One eye remained open, glowing amber with a vertical pupil that narrowed as it fixed on Kalen. He didn't speak. There was no need. The creature lunged, but the restraint held. Muscles quivered. The snare sliced deeper. It collapsed. He descended slowly, palms visible, moving as one would toward a wounded storm. The air around the beast shimmered with the tang of blood and ozone. His mind calculated options. Retreat. Observe. Report. Instead, his hands reached forward toward the central gear of the trap. It was crafted with cruel intent, not designed by wildlife but by a mind that sought dominance. He found the release hidden beneath an angular ridge and pressed it. The trap sprang open with a pneumatic hiss. The creature did not move. It sagged against the forest floor like a temple felled by time. The hours that followed blurred into motion. He hauled the beast free of the ravine using a makeshift sled assembled from his tarp and scavenged branches. The exertion cracked pain down his side, but he didn't stop. He found a clearing near the water's edge and worked in silence. Bandages were soaked in antiseptic paste made from the glowing moss he'd tested. The wounds were severe, the flesh beneath alien in texture but eerily responsive to treatment. Underneath the coarse outer mane, the beast's skin had a shimmer, almost crystalline in cellular structure. He dressed the lacerations, cleaned, the punctures stabilized what he could. As night fell, he built a fire and sat with the creature watching as its breath rose and fell in shallow waves. At some point, the beast opened its eyes again. The amber light returned, but something had shifted. The gaze held not aggression, but calculation. It watched him without moving, the same way ancient trees watched storms. He offered liquid infused with sedative sap. The beast drank. When finished, it nudged the container back toward him with its snout. They didn't speak. The fire did that for them. The following days unfolded in rhythms both strange and inevitable. Kaelin ventured short distances to gather herbs. The beast Thalrex, as the name embedded in its collar suggested, remained near the fire healing. When Kaelin returned from one trip, a small six-legged creature lay dead beside the fire pit. A gift. Protein. Gratitude. He roasted it, ate it, nodded once. The beast chuffed in approval. By the sixth day, Thalrex could move with discomfort but autonomy. Kaelin changed dressings. The wounds were closing faster than human biology allowed. The creature's immune response was beyond anything in Terran databases. Its blood-adapted shifted viscosity based on exposure. A masterpiece of evolution or design. That night, Kaelin found something beneath the fur near the shoulder, a smooth metallic node embedded beneath the skin. It pulsed with faint blue light. Not natural. A tracker. Perhaps even a control device. The implications formed jagged lines in his mind. Someone had placed that there. Someone had set the trap. When he looked into Thalrex's eyes again, the beast met his gaze with a stillness that was not animal. It was awareness. Kaelin did not remove the device. Not yet. He lacked the tools, the sedation, the trust. But in that moment, under the watchful eyes of twin moons, something ancient stirred. And when morning came, it brought more than light. It brought the sound of engines. The hum grew louder, transforming the morning silence into a trembling veil. Kaelin stood at the edge of the clearing, his hand resting on the scarred bark of a tree that shimmered like opal. Between the shadows of its leaves, he glimpsed the source sleek silver and surgical in motion. A vessel unlike any Terran craft descended with eerie precision, the surrounding foliage parting without so much as a rustle. No heat, no smoke, just control. Thalrex rose beside him. The creature no longer limped. Its breath had steadied its movements, regained fluidity. The wound dressings clung to healed skin that no longer bled. Amber eyes stared at the ship without fear, only certainty. 3 figures stepped from the ramp as it touched the forest floor. 2 wore armor that shimmered like water under stars, their weapons unfamiliar but clearly lethal. Between them strode something Kaelin had not expected to see, regality incarnate. Blue-tinted skin laced with living patterns, hair that flowed like woven light, and horns that arched from a forehead framed in gold. She moved with a gait unhurried by threat. Her eyes scanned the clearing once and narrowed. The guards flanked her, weapons half raised. Her voice, though distant, cut through the air with elegance honed into steel. The words were not translated, but Kaelin didn't need them. The focus of her attention was Thalrex. Images pierced Kaelin's mind, fragmented foreign memories that were not his. A younger version of the woman knelt beside Thalrex, her hands fastening the collar Kaelin had seen. Opulent halls, crowds parting as they walked together, hunts through silver jungles, the weight of ceremony, shared purpose. Then, nothing. The woman called out a name that hadn't been spoken yet. Thalrex stepped forward, limping no longer. Its eyes flicked between her and Kaelin. Then it stopped, body angled halfway between them. Not returning. Not retreating. Waiting. The choice startled her. She advanced. Thalrex did not yield. Kaelin stepped into the open. No weapon. No challenge. Just presence. The guards tensed. The woman Serenia, though the name had not yet passed lips, raised a hand. Silence fell again. Without a word, Kaelin motioned toward the wound on Thalrex's side. His meaning was simple. He had mended what they had left broken. The queen or princess regarded him with new interest. She moved closer, her gaze flicking between Thalrex's flank and Kaelin's hands. For a moment, her poise faltered. Concern cracked the mask. Then it hardened again, and she gave a signal. The guards stepped aside. The moment of stillness fractured. Thalrex shifted its massive frame to stand protectively between them both, its tail sweeping low across the grass. The meaning was unmistakable. Whatever bond Serenia had once held, it was now shared. Kaelin boarded their ship without resistance. The guards confiscated his tools, scanned his body, searched for technology he didn't possess. Still Thalrex followed, in silence, in loyalty. Inside the vessel glowed with a life of its own. Walls pulsed softly with ambient light. Seats reshaped beneath him to accommodate human form. Serenia sat across, legs crossed, her expression unreadable. The air between them was thick with calculation. She spoke finely, her voice melodic but cold. Kaelin understood the tone, if not the words. She gestured toward Thalrex, and the creature rested beside him without hesitation. Another shift. The guards noticed. Kaelin replied with quiet clarity. He had done nothing but treat the wounds. The bond, whatever it was, had grown of its own volition. The name Thalrex finally fell from her lips. Her eyes narrowed. She explained the truth, slowly translated through gestures and the quiet repetition of symbols on a floating display. Thalrex was no ordinary beast. It was a royal guardian bonded genetically to the line of House Elendor. Such creatures did not choose companions. They were bred, engineered, cultivated to protect one lineage alone. Their loyalty was encoded. Kaelin listened, then pointed to the healed wounds, to the tracker, to the memory of pain. Thalrex had nearly died. He had not asked to be chosen, but now they were bound. Serenia said nothing more until the ship descended over the capital, a city of crystal and wind with towers that rose like vines from earth. Structures pulsed in shades of coral and silver. Streets glimmered with movement that bent physics. The view swept beneath them, beauty overwhelming even through wariness. As they walked the palace corridors, Thalrex remained at Kaelin's side, ignoring silent commands. Courtiers stared. Whispers bloomed. The sacred guardian beast walking beside an alien. They entered chambers draped in woven light. Everything shifted when touched walls, responding to thought, light to motion. Kaelin was given quarters too luxurious to be generous. A prison lined with silk. Thalrex refused to leave his side. He examined the alien desk. The material rippled under his touch. A chime sounded. The door opened. Serenia stood in different attire, fluid, ceremonial, but soft. Her expression had changed. Less sovereign, more scientist. She studied him not with suspicion, but curiosity. There were no words, just silence and presence. She approached Thalrex first. It did not move. Then her gaze turned to Kaelin again. She showed him a garden, alive, personal, untamed. Not a display for others, but a sanctuary. Flowers opened at her touch. Trees shifted to greet her. This place whispered of her mother, of secrets, of risk. She pointed toward the tracker on Thalrex's shoulder. She did not deny what he'd already guessed. The trap, the poison royal codes had been used. Only 5 people had access. Kaelin's silence was answer enough. She understood. Her face changed again. She moved closer, not with authority but question. The atmosphere coiled tighter. Their breath mingled. Something passed between them, not words, something older. And when her fingers finally touched his face, her skin cooler than he imagined, the air shimmered. No declarations, no confession, just contact. Then the alarm sounded. The tones reverberated like crystal struck in panic, ringing through the garden's living walls and catching on the breath that lingered between them. Serenia's expression sharpened, soft glow fading from beneath her skin as duty reclaimed her form. In an instant, she turned, already moving through the passageways, with Thalrex padding close and Kaelin following without hesitation. There were no guards to call. Thalrex was enough. The silence of urgency hummed louder than footfalls wrapping around them as the alarm drew them to her private quarters. Kadrin, the royal captain, met them with narrowed eyes and a vial in his gloved hand. The report came without pleasantries. A toxin undetectable to most scanners had been introduced into Serenia's refreshment. It would have stopped her heart before the taste could reach memory. The delivery method pointed to a servant aligned with Violith, her cousin, the same rival whose presence had twisted court politics since their childhood. The betrayal was not new. Only the boldness of the attempt had changed. Serenia's poise remained, but something cold had settled into the set of her jaw. Kaelin did not speak. He saw the tremor in her left hand as she closed the chamber doors, saw the way Thalrex positioned himself immediately between her and the exit. The message was clear, the line had been crossed. This was no longer palace intrigue. This was declaration. The following hours blurred into a war of whispers and hidden data. Kaelin was brought before the council chamber, not as a witness, but as something less defined, a presence to be scrutinized. The elders sat robed in indigo and shadow, their expressions unreadable beneath embroidered hoods. Beside them stood Violith, bathed in practiced innocence, and Mirith, her advisor, lurking like fog on the edge of trust. Serenia spoke first. She presented evidence trap codes traced to Valeth's private systems, the captured servant's confession extracted under truth-binding protocols, and the recovered toxin aligned with contraband once hoarded by the same house. She did not raise her voice. Her calm was more damning than rage. Valeth countered with denial, the smooth venom of royal decorum coating each word. She accused Serenia of framing her twisting facts for sympathy. She called Kaelin a plant, a distraction, a weapon seeded from beyond. But as her voice rose, so did Thalrex. The Guardian's roar silenced the chamber, reverberating across the domed crystal ceiling like thunder bottled in a heartbeat. There was no mistaking the symbolism. Elder Morius turned to Kaelin, not for testimony, for presence, for proof of what stood beside him. A sacred beast, engineered to bond only with House Elendor, now guarding a human outsider. The silence cracked. Judgment was passed. Valeth was found guilty of conspiracy against the crown. Her expression as she was led away by armored escorts did not crumble. It calcified into something darker, something patient. In the aftermath, Serenia stood beside Kaelin in her mother's garden, the one place where roots had not yet been poisoned by politics. She touched the petals of a silver blossom as she spoke of legacy, of how she'd never wanted the crown to weigh her so soon. Her words stumbled briefly when she spoke of trust. Of him. Kaelin said nothing, only offered her the truth of his presence. Not ambition, not strategy, just survival bound to a creature who had chosen him before either of them had the chance to understand why. Serenia reached for his hand. There was no ceremony to what followed. The ritual had no name in his tongue. The chamber was neither sacred nor surgical, but something between. Beneath the palace, in a room laced with vines that pulsed like veins, the biopod awaited a remnant of an age when bonding was not just ritual, but transformation. They entered together. Thalrex stood sentinel as Kaelin stepped into the fluid chamber. Serenia followed, her skin already reacting to the pod's resonance. The walls closed not with force, but invitation. Their bodies floated within a field of luminous gel, a suspension between self and surrender. Electro-organic tendrils touched skin. Patterns bloomed. Blood and breath were shared through encoded pulses. Memories drifted between them, scenes from two lives colliding in sensory echoes. Kaelin as a boy under Terran skies, Serenia amidst thrones and shadowed expectation. Their bodies responded to each other's presence, not with passion, but with resonance. The chamber did not demand desire, it demanded alignment. In those moments, genes recognized their counterpart. The foreign became familiar. The bond sealed itself not with ceremony, but with a single heartbeat matched in two chests. When the chamber opened again, they did not step out as they had entered. The skin beneath Serenia's arms shimmered with new patterns that mimicked Terran constellations. Kaelin's eyes for a moment flickered with threads of iridescent light. Thalrex regarded them both not as two, but as one. Later that night, Kaelin stood on the palace balcony, the wind moving like silk through the glowing trees. The air tasted different now, not sweeter but clearer. He felt her presence before he heard it. Serenia stood beside him, no longer guarded by politics or threat. They shared a silence thick with comprehension. Something inside them had changed. And when Thalrex moved to rest between them, tail sweeping the stone, the bond was complete. 3 hearts, 1 rhythm. The dawn broke in hues that defied physics, gold soaked in ultraviolet blues deeper than any Terran sea. The palace stirred beneath the rising light, unaware that something irreversible had taken root within its walls. Kaelin opened his eyes to the quiet, already sensing Serenia's breath, before he heard it, already aware of Thalrex's position near the arched balcony, before his eyes confirmed the beast's massive form resting in shadow. He moved like a man half asleep and half reborn. His limbs held a weightless precision, his breath syncing unconsciously with hers. The bond had not faded with the biopod's closure. It had intensified, woven into the cadence of their cells, their instincts now threading in tandem. When Kadrin arrived with word of unrest in the outer districts, Serenia didn't hesitate. Her ceremonial robes were replaced with tactical weave, her bearing shifting effortlessly into command. She did not instruct Kaelin to stay behind. She did not need to. The moment she stepped toward the transport bay, he was already beside her, and Thalrex followed with a low growl of readiness. The battlefield unfurled beyond the city, where insurgent factions once loyal to Valeth had mobilized ahead of the coronation. They had anticipated confusion, weakness in the wake of her exile. What they met instead was unity. Kalen stood at the edge of the hovercraft's rear gate, wind whipping against his skin. The transport surged over iridescent terrain, bioluminescent trees flaring below like stars. The tactical display hovering before Serenia pulsed with red glyphs indicating movement ahead. Kalen didn't need translation. He understood the rhythm of danger now, in the same way he understood her. They dropped into the jungle as one. The moment boots touched soil, Kalen felt Thalrex's awareness slip into his mind like a shadow cast by moonlight. Not speech, not control. Something older, primal. Each flick of the beast's ear was a signal. Each pulse of breath a warning. Serenia moved beside him without word or wasted motion, the three of them a unit too new to be practiced, yet too perfect to question. Blaster fire shattered the silence. They split not as three, but as extensions of a singular will. Kalen ducked behind a petrified tree as plasma bolts scorched the bark, his pulse already slowed to accommodate adrenaline. Serenia's figure flashed in a blur of azure and gold, her movements a symphony of precision. She didn't need to shout orders. Kalen felt them as intention. Thalrex surged forward with impossible grace, claws sinking into stone mane flaring with electric charge. It moved between bursts of light fangs, catching one attacker mid-dive, a crunch of armor in silence. Kalen felt the pain of the strike in his own ribs, dull and distant. Not injury, but empathy. Their minds shared feedback now, not absolute, but enough. But he rose from cover with unfamiliar confidence, fingers curling instinctively around the alien rifle slung from a fallen guard's corpse. The weapon recognized his biometrics, not native, but authorized by proximity to Thalrex. It whirred to life with a sound like cracking glass. The rebels tried to regroup, they failed. Kalen moved through them with Thalrex at his side, Serenia ahead like a blade of light. Where one hesitated, another advanced. Where one bled, the others surged. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The bond did more than enhance reaction time. It preempted fear, elevated clarity, and erased hesitation. He felt her urgency before she turned. She sensed his risk before he ducked. Thalrex warned them both, seconds before a flanking maneuver even formed. The jungle became their theater. By the time the last rebel had dropped his weapon and dropped to his knees, Kalen stood atop the ridge, his breath steady despite the heat. Serenia emerged from the clearing below, blade-sheathed armor dusted but unmarred. Thalrex padded between them, muzzle stained with smoke and blood. No command had been issued, no decree had been made, but the insurgents knelt anyway. Later, as they returned to the palace, word had already spread through murmured networks and panicked informants that the royal guardian had bonded with an outsider, and that outsider had fought like one born of the blood. The throne was no longer Serenia's alone. The symbol beside her had changed. A human, a hybrid, a herald. In the weeks that followed, more changed than just the tone of courtly whispers. The elder artificers requested Kalen's blood samples, not to interrogate but to understand. The resonance between him and Thalrex carried echoes of the original bonding algorithm sequences thought exclusive to Elendor genetics. His Terran DNA had not replaced it. It had synchronized. This revelation shifted more than belief. It shifted law. One night, in the inner sanctum of the botanical chamber, Serenia stood beside a living pillar of chlorophyll glass, hands tracing the roots of a tree that shimmered with neural light. Kalen stood behind her, watching her without interrupting. Thalrex rested beneath the glow breath, slow, ever watchful. She told him what the elders feared, that if the bond between human and guardian could be replicated, the entire balance of Velmarin authority could collapse or be reborn. That he had become a variable, a symbol, a threat. He understood, but he also understood the weight of the moment when Thalrex had chosen not to return to her until Kalen had stepped into the clearing. He understood the weight of a hand held in silence beneath a canopy of alien stars. They left the garden together, no need for ceremony. They moved through the palace halls, flanked by guards who bowed without hesitation. Something new had arrived. Not just a bond, a future. The city of Elendor Prime stirred beneath the twin moons, restless with anticipation. Rumors filtered through crystalline archways like fog, whispers of betrayal of power, shifted not by lineage, but by choice. Serenia stood at the heart of the council chamber, its circular architecture carved from living crystal that pulsed faintly with emotion, absorbing the tension of every footstep. Around her, the Council of Elders formed a crescent of silence, draped in robes dark as deep-sea stone faces, obscured by bioluminescent veils that shimmered only when emotion leaked through. Kaelin stood at her side, not apart, not behind. Thalrex rested beside him like a shadow, given flesh, the ancient guardian's amber gaze unblinking. The court watched them as one watches a rift in time, awed, unsettled, unwilling to look away. Mareth stood near the perimeter, his stance composed but alert eyes ever calculating. Across from him, Valith had returned not with violence but with petition. Her exile had been short-lived, her influence not yet withered. She stood in indigo regalia. Her voice practiced, her gaze sharp. She demanded a review, a formal challenge to Serenya's ascension, citing violation of tradition, contamination of bloodlines, and the corruption of sacred rites. Serenya's response did not come in volume. It came in certainty. She called the chamber to witness what had been wrought not through manipulation, but through resonance. She spoke of the attempt on her life, the trap, the poison. She laid out the sequence of betrayals like constellations, each point undeniable when traced. She gestured not to evidence alone, but to Thalrex, whose very presence served as final testimony. Kaelin said nothing. He did not need to. His existence was the argument. The council deliberated in murmurs that moved like currents. Some among them feared a precedent. Others saw only danger. One elder Morian stood finely and raised her palm veins glowing with gentle blue light. She declared that proof must be deeper than speech, that the bond must be tested through the ancient rite of convergence, a fusion of mind and purpose, broadcast for all to witness. A procedure not used in generations, for no bond had required such scrutiny. Serenia accepted. The convergence chamber was carved from obsidian vine, a subterranean cradle of thought and memory. Kaelin and Serenia stood at its center, stripped of distraction, their forms mirrored by the smooth black surfaces around them. Neural threads descended from above, ancient, yet humming with power, designed to link emotion, perception, instinct. Thalrex remained outside, but his breath reverberated through the stone. When the convergence began, there were no visions, only feeling, the weight of choices, the sharpness of doubt, the ache of memory. Kaelin felt her childhood in fragments, a crown too heavy, a mother too distant, duty stitched into her bones before she knew what childhood meant. Serenia felt his breath catch at the image of Earth from orbit, the first time he saw its oceans from the void, and how loneliness had followed him even to other stars. They felt each other's hesitation. They also felt the silence that had been filled since. When the convergence ended, they stood as before, but different. The council had seen enough. Elder Morian bowed her head. The bond was not only real, it was true. The final coronation commenced in silence. The throne platform rose from the center of the garden atrium, wrapped in flowering vines that unfurled with each step Serenia took. Her ceremonial armor shimmered with soft energy patterns, shifting in reflection of her lineage and her transformation. Kaelin stood beside her, no longer alien, no longer other. He wore the colors of the house, now reborn, silver and midnight, and bore the subtle markings of resonance beneath his skin. Thalrex approached the platform without command, laying his massive head across the base of the dais. His tail swept across the stone in solemn rhythm. The crowd did not cheer, not yet. The moment required breath before sound. Elder Morian placed the living crown across Serenia's brow. Threads of metal and root adjusted to her skull, wrapping her in legacy. Then came the roar. Thalrex's cry rose into the sky, carrying with it a resonance that struck the air like lightning. In response, the crowd erupted, not in noise alone, but in kinetic energy. The city pulsed. The lights across Elendor Prime flared in synchrony. The vines in the atrium bloomed in rapid sequence, color pouring like paint across the walls. Serenia raised her hand. Then finally, the voice of a queen. She spoke not of conquest or lineage. She spoke of integration, of threads woven from different planets, different minds now twined into something more. She spoke of the future not as an extension of the past, but as a promise only possible because of change. When she turned to Kaelin, it was not for ceremony. It was for affirmation. His hand found hers in full view of 1,000 gathered eyes. Later, as twilight descended and the halls of celebration echoed with light, Serenia and Kaelin withdrew to the only place untouched by judgment, the sanctuary beneath the botanical spires. The air there was quieter, thicker with meaning. Thalrex rested nearby, one eye open as always. They said nothing for a long while. Their hands remained clasped between them. She studied the ridges of his palm. He traced the constellation on her shoulder where once there had been none. She asked him what he saw now when he looked forward. He did not answer in words. He leaned close, breath meeting hers, and kissed her with the steadiness of one who had made peace with permanence. There was no fanfare, no procession, only convergence. And above them, the stars of Velmara blinked in silent rhythm. The days that followed unfolded with a serenity that felt earned. Velmara did not change overnight, but its heartbeat shifted. The palace no longer carried only echoes of legacy, but the pulse of something newly formed. Serenia moved through its marble halls not just as queen, but as sovereign of a redefined future. Her presence was no longer shadowed by the expectations of her mother's crown. It was flanked by Kaelin's calm steadiness and Thalrex's undeniable loyalty. Together, they embodied something the court could neither replicate nor dismiss. Outside, the capital cities adjusted. Traditions bent, but did not break. The Council of Elders, once absolute in interpretation, now adapted. Debates turned from bloodlines to bonds, from purity to potential. Scholars reclassified the resonance between guardian and human, not as anomaly, but as emergent evolution. The notion that one born beyond Velmara could connect with a creature grown in the marrow of Ilendor's oldest rites, this no longer bred fear, but curiosity. Kaelin did not seek titles, but titles found him. Ambassadors referred to him as the bonded one, the outsider within the first bridge. Children in outer provinces sculpted small clay Thalrex beasts, placing painted Terran stars on their sides. Serenia watched it all unfold with measured grace. She allowed the myths to blossom as they would, knowing some truths were more powerful when clothed in symbol. Inside the palace, however, life took on a rhythm more intimate. The garden behind Serenia's chambers became their sanctuary. The plants responded not only to light and song, but to their moods. Flowers leaned toward Kaelin as if they recognized something in his breath. Thalrex took to lying among the tall-stemmed reeds like a watchtower wrapped in fur and muscle. Kaelin spent mornings in the botanical archive, now fully accessible to him. He deciphered the cellular patterns of Velmaran flora, blending them with Earth's botanical structure. He discovered that certain species shared chemical compositions identical to those found in long-extinct Terran plants, an impossible echo that hinted at deeper universal links. Serenia joined him often not as a queen, but as a peer. Sometimes they spoke in fragments of research. Sometimes they said nothing at all, letting the quiet fill the space between discoveries. Evenings brought the wind. From the balcony, the capital shimmered like it breathed its lights, moving in gentle pulses. Serenia would wrap herself in thin silk and lean against Kaelin's shoulder, both of them watching not the city, but the night beyond it. When he held her, he often felt her thoughts before they were spoken. An undercurrent of emotion shaped not by words, but by the bond still singing between their cells. One such evening, she turned to him with a question that curved softly from her lips. What would he choose now if he could? Earth had not called for him since the crash. No signal had come. The ship was likely presumed lost. A memorial might already stand with his name. Return was not forbidden, but what remained to return to? He looked out toward the twin moons, then toward her. He chose to stay. Not with ceremony, not with sacrifice, but with understanding. They would move forward together. When the time came for her to stand again before the people, this time to initiate a new era, not merely continue a dynasty, Kaelin stood beside her. He wore garments spun from Velmaran weave dyed in silver and dusk blue stitched with symbols drawn from Terran constellations and Thalrex's gene signature. Serenia's speech spoke of renewal, of coevolution, of harmony found not in shared origin but in shared purpose. She extended her hand toward Kaelin without flourish. He took it as though it had always belonged there. Thalrex roared once, not as warning, but as declaration. The people answered in unison, voices raised not in worship, but in recognition. In the following cycle, Serenia began a new initiative, one that would chart the deep jungles beyond the known provinces, expand alliances with outer world communities, and establish resonance research as a pillar of science and state. Kaelin led the scientific expedition teams. Serenia remained their sovereign. Thalrex accompanied them both, never needing reins, never bound by leash, always watching, always near. Years passed. In a chamber deep beneath the palace archives, a new form stirred. Not artificial, not born, but grown in embryo, suspended in biolight, cradled within a pod of velvet vines. It bore no precedent in Velmaran biology, no pure Terran signature either. It glowed in pulses of 3. Its heart beat to rhythms known only to 3 souls, the Queen, the Outsider, and the Guardian. The chamber was silent. Then a flicker of light passed across its surface like the first breath of a star. Later, beneath the canopy of the sanctuary garden, Serenia rested her head against Kaelin's chest, their hands interlaced across the curve of her belly. Thalrex lay curled nearby, his eyes half-lidded in contentment. They did not speak. They simply watched the moons rise. And in that silence, the future stirred. This is the story of Kaelin the botanist who fell from the stars, and Thalrex the guardian beast who should have torn him apart, but instead chose to stand beside him. It is the story of Serenia the Queen, not just born, but forged, who looked beyond tradition and found her future in the impossible. Together they bridged not only 2 species, but 2 civilizations, rewriting what it meant to be bonded not by birthright or protocol, but by resonance. They turned a trap into a calling, a wound into a covenant, and a chance encounter into a transformation that shook an empire. Through survival silence and shared instinct, they built something new, something destined. And as Velmara's moons shone down on their bond, their legacy reached further than even they could see. In a world where species once stood apart, they proved that connection is not defined by biology alone, but by trust, sacrifice, and the will to stand together when no one else dares to. Thank you for joining us on this journey across alien jungles, royal chambers, and ancient technologies. If this story moved you, made you feel, or sparked wonder, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. Let us know what you'd do if you were the human in Kaelin's place, or the guardian beast with a choice no one expected. Until next time, travelers, stay curious, stay kind, and stay bonded.